So today we're going to talk about kind of what controls you have and what functions are available to those of you who are club administrators, or you might hear me use kind of interchangeably subgroup administrators. That's the Club Express terminology, but for Serra International, it's club administrators. Club Express throws around a few terms in terms of who has access to what, and we'll be kind of going over what sets those apart. The page I'm showing you right now, this shows kind of some separate uh, access levels, that being administrators versus coordinators. These are the two types of administration coordinators that currently exist in every Club Express setup. Your organization, Sarah International, uses an additional layer of administration called subgroup administration. So if you ever want to go, and I'll point this out again later on, if you ever want to go access the help system and read about the different types of security levels, this is the page I would recommend. You can always find that in our help system. And again, I'll point out how I got here in just a minute. Um, but to point out some primary differences between what we would call top level administrators, coordinators, and subgroup administrators. On this page, it's going to lay it all out. To quickly hop over to a different page to kind of point out how those are set up. Um, for our administrators and coordinators, there's a page in the control panel, and we'll talk about how to get to the control panel as well, called administrators and coordinators. It'll only show up, that option will only show up for full administrators. So those of you who are club administrators, assigning people to be subgroup administrators or coordinators or administrators is something you would have to reach out to a top level administrator to take care of. To be set up as a coordinator, the way that works is there are a number of functions. And we can see on this screen, this is the coordinator creation screen. This is where we can go in and go in and say we want to give a particular person access to a particular module or part of the control panel. So you'll see there's tons of different functions that we're able to check and uncheck here. Keep in mind when it comes to coordinators, this is not something that is subgroup or club specific. So this is when I assign someone to be a coordinator, they are a top level coordinator for all clubs of whatever options we assign to them. So here we could say we want to give someone access to the people manager. If I give someone coordinator level access to the people manager, they are not limited to their particular subgroup or their club. They would have access to use the people manager for every single member of Serra International. So keep that in mind when you're looking at any of these functions. If you're ever wanting to be a coordinator of a particular function, keep in mind it's not going to constrain you to the club that you're in. The third type, and the one we'll be focusing on today, is what we would call a subgroup administrator. So separate from a top level administrator and separate from a coordinator. If we hop over to this page over here, we can see the list of all of our different organizations, all of our different clubs. The one I'll be using as an example today is Chicago, because that's where I live. And so I've set up like a fake little administrator. And so if we wanted to set someone to be an administrator over either a district or a club, we can do that from this screen. This is yet another screen that is also only available to top level administrators. So if you need to be added as a club administrator or removed as a club administrator or have another administrator added to your club, that is one more function that has to be, you'd have to get in contact with someone from your top level administrative team and speak to them about being added or removed as a club administrator. And again, that is just done on this page where administrators can find that option. This is one more place that you as a club administrator won't see this page. This is just a little bit of behind the scenes background. So now let's go talk about what it means to be a subgroup administrator or a club administrator. And let's head over to a page. So I'm currently on this page, I'm logged in as a top level administrator. I'm going to switch screen shares and change my web browser to a place where I'm logged in as a subgroup administrator of the Chicago club. Okay. So this is the same control panel we were kind of looking at just a second ago, but the main difference is instead of being logged in as what you probably saw up there as SA, or super admin where I'm a top level administrator. I'm now logged in as test member, and test member up here in the very top right corner. This person has been made just a club administrator over Chicago. You'll notice I still have access to the control panel and the favorites options. So this test member has access to the control panel, but in a slightly more limited function. And in any places where this club administrator has access to the control panel, it's all in the context of the club that this person is an administrator over. So to kind of take a brief look at what modules we have access to, when we click on the control panel here, it takes us to this control panel page and we see a number of tabs right off the bat. So we see people, website, money, organization, communication, support. These are all different tabs, and depending on what tab we click on, we will see different options available to us to administer on this website. If we just kind of start left to right and start in the people tab, Club Express kind of has this ideology where we like to order things in order of most used. And so we put the people tab kind of first because it is the most used tab of the control panel. And we also put the people manager front and center. So those of you who are looking for like the golden, nugget for this training, I would say the people tab, people manager, that is going to be a place that you're probably going to use the most often. This is where you would go to make any sort of membership changes. So if you need to add a member, remove a member, make changes to a member's information, the people manager is where you go to do that. Keep in mind, because you're a club administrator or a subgroup administrator, you will only have access to manage the people who are in your club. So you will not see anyone else in Serra International who is not assigned to your club. There's also the people lookup tool. It is almost identical to the people manager. The only difference is this is just where we can go look up information. There's no changes. There's no edit function there. So you're just seeing the information about the member. So if you're ever just wanting to learn about a member and you don't want to risk accidentally clicking the wrong button, you can always use the people lookup instead, and you'll just see their information without having the options to make changes to it. And then one more kind of like people management tool is the subgroup member manager. That's where we can go and just take a quick look at all of the members currently in our subgroup. Again, there's that term subgroup instead of club. So we have slightly different terminologies. But anytime, anywhere you hear me say or you see the term subgroup, that is the same thing as club. In the people section, we also have our committees and boards. We'll be taking a pretty deep look at how to manage our committees. And again, and I'll probably say this 100 times today, but again, you'll only see the committees that are relevant to your club. So I'm in the Chicago chapter, and I'm also, or Chicago club, and I'm also an administrator for the Chicago club. So when I click on committees, I know there are a lot of committees in the organization, but I will only see the Chicago board option because that's the only committee that has been assigned to my subgroup. I'll be coming back there in just a minute to kind of go through how to manage that. Jumping over to the website tab, we have options for things like managing web pages, photos, and photo albums. We can create as many custom pages, what we would call custom pages, as we want, which are just informational pages. Keep in mind, those are also tagged to our subgroup. It is important to know when it comes to custom pages, any pages you create will not immediately be added to the website menu. So if you have a page that you want either linked to on the home page or linked to on a different page, if it's not a page that was already assigned to your subgroup, you would have to have a top level administrator add that to the website navigation. So essentially what that means is you can create a page, but there's not inherently going to be navigation to that page unless a top level administrator adds it to a page that is accessible to everyone. We also have photos and photo albums. I won't go too deep into those today because they're fairly self-explanatory on their own. Photos is just a bulk storage place for all the photos that have been added to the website. And then photo albums, this is the module that members, so even non-admin members can go and look at to see, organizations of photos. So if you have, an event and you want to share pictures from that event, you can go and create a photo album. But just as all the other things we're talking about today, that is going to be tagged and connected to your subgroup. Both custom pages and photo albums, if you were to make those pages public, would technically be accessible to users outside of your chapter. So it'll be marked and tagged as, for me in this case, it would be those pages and that photo album would show as this is a Chicago photo album. But people outside of the Chicago chapter, if that album is made public, would be able to still see it, but they would just know that it is a Chicago-based album. The document library is another place that we'll be spending a lot of time today. This is where we can go and we can store all of our relevant documentation. Documents can be any file type. So if you have PDFs or Excel spreadsheets or Word documents you want to share with your users, you can add that there. An important note, and we'll talk more in depth about this. I'm just kind of doing a brief overview right at the top. When it comes to the document library, you can add any documents you want, but the documents you as a club administrator add will be only visible to members of your club. There is not an option currently for club administrators to create documents that are visible to all members or visible to the public. And when I say public, I mean non-members of your Serra International Club. So keep in mind any documents for the time being that you add are only visible to people who are active members of your subgroup or club. There's also events. We'll be doing a future training on events, and I believe probably most of you will be invited to that. When it comes to events, that is a module that is probably our most complex module at Club Express, just because we have so many options for you to toggle on and off. When you create an event, it's going to, just like with our custom pages and photo albums, going to be kind of keyed to your subgroup. There is an option when you're creating events to say, this is an event that only members of my subgroup can attend. But even if you're a subgroup admin, you can actually make events that are available to all Serra International members or members of, even non-members. So you can make public access events if you would like. It will just show that it was created by someone from, in my case, it would say this is a Chicago chapter event that is open to the public. So you can make events that are available to everyone. It's just not it's not what we would call a top level event. So it will show that it is limited to show that it was originated from your chapter. I saw in the comments, someone said, is there a file size limit? There is a file size limit in our document library. So if you're uploading files, the limit is pretty large, 300 megabytes, which is plenty big for any document style. So if you have large images or PDFs, Excel spreadsheets, all that stuff, I can't imagine there's a single PDF or Excel spreadsheet that's going to be larger than 300 megabytes. For things like videos, that is a limiting factor. So videos take up a lot of storage space. So that's, that equates to, if we're talking about like a medium resolution video, that's like a 5 to 10 minute maximum video, depending on your video resolution. So if you're looking to upload like long format videos, we usually recommend putting those somewhere like YouTube or Vimeo or something like that. And then you can link to them on, say, like a custom page or some other location. The document library is meant more for documents. So again, images, files, Word documents, PDFs, stuff like that. There's also someone who's asking, is there an extra charge for additional web pages? No, there's no limit to the number of web pages your subgroup can have. So you can create, 100 or 2, whatever you would like. So let's move over. Again, we'll talk about events in detail in a future training. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. And when we do create events in the future, I will talk about the specifics as it relates to your club versus a top level event. So if we head over to the money tab, there's not a ton of options in the money tab. Primarily, there's going to be the transaction search where you can go and search for any outstanding or paid transactions that members of your subgroup or club have submitted. You can also look at any open credits. So if someone has a transaction refunded to them, that would be created as what we would call a credit. So it's kind of like a gift card that sits on the website. So let's say someone registers for an event and then they canceled that registration, if they had paid for that event registration, it wouldn't immediately be credited back to their credit card. What would happen is they would receive a credit on the website, and the next time they sign up for an event that has a charge or incur any sort of charge on the website, they can apply that credit towards it. So essentially, they get their money back on the website and can pay it forward towards their next purchase on the website. Depending on your organization as a whole, so this is something that your top level administrators would control. Depending on your organization's payment processing, there can be an option to refund to people's credit cards, but I don't believe that is currently set up. So right now, if someone gets a refund for any charge, it would just exist as a credit on the website that they can use in the future. Those can be removed. So if you were to pay someone back via, say, like, hey, I mailed you a check, or, I gave you cash back in person, or, sent them money via some third party system, you could say, hey, this has been refunded. And this is actually where you would go to do that. So you would go to your open credits, find that credit that you refunded to your member, and you can remove it from there. Bank account activity. This is one I don't foresee a lot of it doesn't get a ton of use, but it just lets you see any transactions between the organization and Club Express. For bank account activity as a subgroup, you'll only see transactions between if you have a subgroup bank account and Club Express. So if you were to have your own bank account for your subgroup and you collect funds for members for something related to a subgroup, so say like an event that you hosted only for your subgroup and it has fees, you would go here and you would be able to see us remit that to your bank account. So you'd be able to go and take a look at those funds as they get back to your bank account. But you would also see that information show up in your own bank account statement as well. Um, there's also reports where we can see here, and reports is going to give us the option to get financial data exports. So we can come in here and we can look at all of the transactions, all of the payments that have been submitted by our users. Again, these are all going to be filtered to only instances of members in your subgroup. So I am a Chicago admin, so I'm only going to see transactions from my Chicago members. Jumping over to the organization tab, as a subgroup admin, you only have one function here, and it is the data export option. And this is just a place where we can go and we have a lot of different reports that we can run. And these will always export to an Excel file. It'll actually be a CSV file for those of you who use non-Excel comma separated value tools. But for the most part, most people open CSVs in Excel. And these are just the different reports. There's tons of them here. This is a place where I probably won't go one by one through these. If you're looking for a certain type of export, I would recommend just coming and playing around in here. Pretty much any data that comes into your club or subgroup is probably represented here in some way. So there's tons of different types of reports you can pull. And you would just simply select if you wanted, let's just start at the top and say, hey, I want to know all of my club members. I can go to members here. I can select a date range if that's applicable. So this is, the date range applies to the member join date. So I could say, hey, I'm looking for all of my members that joined within a certain date range. If I leave that blank, it's just going to give me all of my members. And you can see here, it says all my subgroup members. I only have that option. This is one of the first places where we'll see something interesting. You'll see where it says all my subgroup members and then the option for Chicago. In my specific case, those are effectively the same thing. There is a scenario where you may or may not be a club administrator or a subgroup administrator for multiple subgroups. From the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. If it does happen, it'll be rare. But in the off chance, when you see this subgroup dropdown, it'll either let you pull for all of your subgroups. So if you're an admin of 2 subgroups, you would get a report for all of them. But let's say, I'm over Chicago and New York, I would see the option to export just for Chicago, just for New York, or for both, or for any of them that I'm an admin over. And then you would just hit the export button and it would download to your device. That's our data exports. That's pretty much it for the organization tab. So now we can kind of leave this tab and move on. In communications, this is another place where we'll spend a little bit more time on the tail end of this training. There's a few options here. We have text messaging, emailing, and forums available to us. Text messaging and emailing work very similarly. Obviously, the only difference is one is being sent out as a text message and one is being sent out as an email. When it comes to text messaging, this is something your top level administrators have to opt in on. So I don't believe text messaging is currently enabled, but if it ever is enabled, it functions the same way emailing does. You would just set up a distribution list and send it out to your members. In both cases, for both text messaging and emailing, um, you are again limited to only sending messages uh, to your subgroup, to your chapter, to your club. So if you try to send an email to someone outside of your club, it will technically allow you, and we'll look at a scenario where it'll look like you are sending it to people outside of your club. But even if you tried to do so, it would not send to those people. The last option is forums here, and this is where we can go in and we can create forums for our members to kind of interact with each other. And just as we've said for pretty much every other module, this is something where we can create a forum specifically for our subgroup, for our clubs, but this is not going to allow you to create forums for all members. If you want to interact, if you want to kind of create or modify a forum that is available to multiple subgroups or to all members, that is something that your top level admins would have to do. The final tab of the control panel is our support tab. And this is where we can go to kind of get support for our website. So there's things like our video tutorials. This is the same, whether you're an administrator or a coordinator or a subgroup admin, you have access to all of our help tutorial, all of our help systems. So there's things like our old boot camps, which are just kind of like intensive courses on getting like really nitty gritty on certain topics. We have our online help system. So I spoke way back at the beginning about our online help system. This is one of the places where you can get to our online help, and you can just say, click here, and it'll take you to a new tab with our help system. And you can find all of the articles, all of the information on how to access our help system. We have tons and tons of documentation on how every single module works. So if you're ever lost, you can always try checking here, and I promise you there is an article on whatever you are trying to complete. There is also, you'll recognize this question mark. You'll see this question mark on just about any page you're on. So if you're ever curious about something that you're trying to edit, let's say, let's hop back over to our organization tab. We've already taken a look at data exports. If we're confused about how this page works or we get lost, you'll see that same question mark over here in the right-hand corner. When I hover over it, it's going to give me the options to watch a video about running reports and data exports. So there's a little YouTube link where we have a video tutorial on that topic. There's also the option to go visit the help topic for that page, which would again open a new tab to our help system. We can also just click on the question mark if we want. So if we click the question mark, it opens up a new tab, and it's going to pre-open our data export. So here's this little article about the information about how to use that page. So anywhere on our website, if we see that question mark, it's not just going to take you to the help system and make you search. It'll actually preload the page for the content you're currently looking at. So that was the data export. If I'm back here on the control panel, I have the question mark again. And if I click it here, this gives us our control panel help system. So it's always going to take you to the help for what you're currently looking at. All right, so now let's go and talk about some of the functions available to us and how to use the important subgroup functions. I'm going to go first again. So I spoke kind of, we love to order things in order of importance. Let's go start with the people manager. So if we head over to the people tab of the control panel and we jump into the people manager, the first thing we're going to see is this kind of search box and a handful of buttons over on the right-hand side. When it comes to searching for members, you'll notice there's already going to be a kind of like filter value set up for you. This is what we call our default search. So our default search is going to be searching for our members. You have the option to look for non-members that have been assigned to your subgroup. So there is, we do have the option to store information about people who are not members and who don't have the ability to log in. Or you can even search for both. You can say, I want my search results to contain both members and non-members. The default is going to be set to members. For member status, the default search is going to include both active and expired. The expired status here should be irrelevant. Serra International members do not expire. It doesn't mean you have to come in here and uncheck it. It shouldn't matter because your members aren't going to be expired anyway. It does include active, and a vast majority of your search should be about active members. So this should contain everyone you're looking for. There is a status called dropped, and if you have a member who has become inactive and you need to remove them from your chapter, this is what you would set them to. This is the option, and I'll go through how to change them to the drop status. There's a number of other statuses here that have slightly more niche use cases. So there's things like frozen. Frozen is a status that's intended to be used as a temporary holding place. So if someone were to break a rule and you're not sure if they're getting kicked out of Serra International or not, you can put them in frozen and say, hey, I'm freezing your membership. We might reinstate you or we might drop you. Not sure yet. Otherwise, it kind of works like dropped. If a frozen member tries to log in, it'll let them know, like, hey, you can't currently log in. Hopefully, you guys have to use that very infrequently. And then there's a couple other statuses that probably won't apply as much to our subgroup admins. There's things like bulk loaded that will not apply. So that's going to be only used once when your members are loaded into the website. You shouldn't have to look for that. And then there's also new payment pending and prospective. Those are members who are attempting to join Serra International, but still need to pay their membership dues or be approved by an administrator. Again, for our subgroup administrators, I don't think those will apply. You'll just mainly be looking for your active and expired members. And the last one down here is trial. That's also a status that you currently won't be using, so you shouldn't have to go and look for anything on that. So that's our status option. The next option for our search is going to be by last name. You'll notice it is already pre-filled as blank, and we can leave it that way. If we just want to see a list of all of our active members, we actually don't need to change our filter at all. We can just land on our people manager and hit the search button. So if we do that, it's just going to show us all of our active members. And we can see here, we've got a list of all of our Chicago members as shown. Um, and we can see, here's all of our active members. You'll see a lot of kind of like cursory information once we search. So we'll see their member number within Serra International. You'll see their full name. In parentheses here, you'll see their username. So if someone forgets their username, you can actually just see it right here. If someone forgets their password, I'll talk about how you can help them get their password back. We do not show password or even offer a password to any administrators. Even top level administrators don't have access to passwords. Even I, a Club Express admin, don't have access to passwords. Those are completely private and encrypted, so we don't ever give a way to share that. If you have to help someone get their password back, the way you would do that is by giving them a new temporary password. And I'll show you how to do that in just a few minutes. There is an envelope here. You'll see it might be missing for certain members. So we'll see Debbie member is a test member that we set up in our last training. And Debbie doesn't have an email. So you'll notice that the envelope icon is missing. If you see the envelope, that means that person has an email attached to it. And that's just a hyperlink to their email address. So if you want to send a single member an email, you can click on that envelope. It will not take you to the Club Express emailing module. What it'll do is, because it's a hyperlink, whatever device you're on, it'll open up the default email manager. So if I were to click on that for, say Jim here, it would open up Outlook for me because I'm on a PC and I use Outlook. So it'll open Outlook and begin crafting email to that person. If I'm on an iPhone, it might open the mail app, so on and so forth with whatever device you're on. In the next column over, we'll see their membership type and their membership status. So you'll see some people are set to TBD. That is a membership type that is most likely going to be phased out. It seems like they'll be changed to what we would call a non-member. And so we'll go over how to change them to a non-member in just a second here. But there's also an option for if you see member and you'll see active. So below their member type, you'll see their membership status. So again, up here, member status, we're looking at active. If we needed to freeze or drop a member or remove a member, this is the button we would use to do it. So if we need to change a member status, we can actually click on their status right here. So here's Michael. That's one of my coworkers, and I can kind of use him as a guinea pig. If we click on active here for Michael, we'll see the option. We have three options available to us. We have freeze, drop, and expire. As a note, we should not, as club administrators, use the expire option. Serra International members do not expire. If you expire someone, they would get a notice letting them know their membership is expired. And if they try to log in, it'll ask them to renew. That whole process is irrelevant to Serra International. So if you're trying to remove a member or mark a member as inactive, the option to choose is dropped. So you'd select dropped. There's a number of reasons it's going to ask you why this person is being dropped. There's anything from, a member has passed away, they have a duplicate account, they have, it was an admin error. There's a number of options. Maybe they moved out of your chapter. There's a lot of different options here, and ultimately, if you don't see it on the list, you can just list it as unknown. So there's not a requirement to fill in a very specific reason. You can leave it as unknown if necessary. And then there's the options of what to do with the transactions outstanding for a member. So if they have, event transactions or something like that, you can choose what you want to do with that information. You can choose to delete it. So if a member, let's say passes away and need to remove them, obviously we're not going to be collecting those funds from that member, so we can choose to delete them. In the case where we have a duplicate member, so let's say Michael accidentally set up two accounts, we need to remove one of them, we would drop the duplicate account and choose duplicate as our reason, and we could choose to move those transactions. So, on one account he has an open transaction, on the other he doesn't. We need to move that transaction from one account to another. We can actually choose to move it, and we can come in here and we can say I want to select a member, and we would go in and we would find, obviously we don't have two Michaels set up currently, so I'm not going to find another Michael, but I could come in here and I could search for Michael, and it would go find that member and move that over to that person. And then finally, there's the do not change transaction. So you can actually have a dropped member with an outstanding transaction. So if you have a member who leaves the organization and they owe for an event they attended or something, you can leave that transaction as still pending on their account. And if they were to send you a check, you can still go and find a dropped member and mark that transaction as paid. And I'll show you how to do that as well. Once we drop a member, so let's say we're going to drop for just admin error. We'll say admin error, Michael shouldn't be here. I'm not going to change any transactions, and I'll save. You'll notice Michael drops off the list here. So now, because I'm searching for active members and Michael is no longer active, he disappears from our list. But if we change our search, we come over here and say, I actually just want to go look for my dropped members, and I search, now I can see here's Michael again. And I can actually come in here and I can do a number of things. I can click on dropped again, and I have two options available to me. I have the option to reinstate Michael. I also have the option to convert Michael to a non-member. So if Michael was, let's say, our TBD membership, which is supposed to be moving over to non-member accounts, so we don't want Michael to be in the system, we can say convert to a non-member and save. I'm not going to remove Michael's account just yet because we need it, but it would move it to a non-member. It would retain the affiliation with our club. So it would still be a Chicago quote unquote non-member. But it would change them to a non-member of the organization. Let's go ahead and reinstate Michael. I'll save this option. You'll see he drops back off the list because right now I'm searching for dropped members. If I change back to searching for active, because I reinstated Michael, we've got him back set to active. Let's see. So someone asked if a member is set to frozen. So if we freeze Michael here and save, when someone is frozen, they're actually treated the same way a dropped member is treated. So they're not going to show up in your database. They're not going to show up in your member directory. They're not going to show up in your email list either. So frozen members will not get emails or anything like that. If they're frozen, it's treating them like they're not a member. Only active members are going to get those information. And we can repeat that same process we did with dropped. We can go in here and select frozen as our type. We'll see Michael is here and frozen. I can choose to reinstate and go back. We can go back and find Michael again. So that's how we kind of control, if a member needs to be dropped or removed. You should note when it comes to dropping a member, you'll notice here we've got options for people in the next column over. We're looking at primarily, oops, that was a primarily primary. We're looking at primary members right now. You'll notice there are also secondary members. So that is someone who has a membership, maybe it's a spouse or a family member, and their memberships are connected. If you have a secondary member and you drop the primary, the secondary's membership is connected to their primary. So in this case, if we look at Mary here, and I'll show you how I did this in just a second, but let's say that's for Jim. So it's Jim and Mary. So Jim here is the primary, and I can actually see, if by clicking on this icon over here, I'll go through all these icons. I can see Jim's secondary is Mary. If I were to drop Jim, if I chose this option and saved, it would also drop Mary. So keep in mind when you are going in to drop a member or to freeze a member or anything of that sort, anything you do to the primaries account will also take effect on the secondary account. So very important to keep that in mind. If you want to drop a member, let's say a secondary member is staying in your organization, but your primary member is not, you have the option to, and there's a couple ways to kind of achieve this. We can come over here to Mary and we can click on the active option. When I click on active for Mary, who's a secondary, the only option I get is promote to full member. And if I do that, it will disconnect Mary from Jim. Now I can reconnect Mary again if I want to. I can come in here and I can go up to my member options. So this is the first time we'll be taking a look at these buttons up here. Under member options, there's a level changes control. And I can come in here and one of the options, we'll go through a couple of these options really briefly, but one of the options is to link a solo member. So when I say solo, that means a primary member that doesn't have any secondaries. And I want to reconnect Mary. So I can come in here and I'll say it's Colantino. That's how you say that, I think. And I can choose which members I want to connect together. So I can come in here for my member and I'll select, I think it's just Colantino. There we go, Mary Jo. So now I'm connecting Mary Jo and I need to choose what primary I'm connecting Mary Jo to. And I'll search for Valentino again. And there's Jim. So now I've selected to link the solo Mary to Jim and I can make that save. And now I'm back to Mary being a secondary to Joe. So that is that process. Again, if I wanted to drop Joe or Jim here for some reason, instead of just dropping, I want to make sure that Jim doesn't have any secondaries. If I go over again, the icon is this little double person with a chain link. That icon will only show up for a user that has secondaries. And if I click on it, we'll see secondary members, Mary Jo. So if I see that icon there, we know this person has a secondary membership and we need to kind of disconnect them before deleting them. If both members, let's say, left the organization and we want to get rid of both of them, we can pretty easily do that just by dropping Joe and it would drop both of them at the same time. So it can occasionally be useful to drop them without separating them, but you usually do want to do it together. All right, so now let's move on to talking about these various different icons here. So you'll see the pencil icon for everyone. I'm going to do a loop back to the pencil because the pencil is probably the one that'll take the longest. So I'm going to jump over that and we'll circle back to it. I'm going to use Michael as an example again. We have this option here, mailing list categories. This is an option you shouldn't have to manually manipulate very much. This is just a mailing list category that you can use in the emailing tool. Most of these options will be taken care of automatically. So you'll see the options say, for example, donor here. If someone donates to the organization, they'll automatically get added to the donor list. If someone signs up for an event, they'll automatically get added to the event registrant list. This is just a place where you can go and see what mailing list categories someone belongs to or doesn't belong to, and you can manually add and remove them if you'd like. But again, most of these are taken care of automatically. The next icon over is the biography page icon. We can click on that to take a brief look at a member's biography page. This is mostly unfilled in here because Michael's just a test account, but we can see things like what club does Michael belong to, name, information. Because we're an administrator over this person, we can see all of their info. So they may have selected not to share all the information, but because we are administrators, we will see all of it. So if you're ever seeing private information, you're like, oh, it's interesting that they're sharing this. You might be seeing that because you're an administrator. It might not be public information. So just keep that in mind. We'll also see a notes field. So this little sticky note icon here is where we can come and keep notes. I know Michael very personally, so I can come in here and I can leave a note about Michael. And I can say, Michael is very nice. And I can save that. Now that I've added a note there, you'll see the icon changes slightly. It how now has little like scribbles on it, has a little green plus icon instead of a red zero. That just lets you know that another administrator has left a note. Those notes are not available to non-admins. So Michael, if Michael's not an administrator, will not see that note. So if you need to remind yourself, hey, broke rule 4 or something like that, in your bylaws or something, you can keep that here and it's not going to show up to Michael. It won't notify Michael that this note has been taken, but other administrators can see that that's the case. So if you have something that you need to be noted on a member, you can put it there. Do keep in mind that if you put a note there, other administrators will see it, including if Michael were to be made an administrator later and this was here, they will see it. So, it's not super sneaky. You want to be, nice about the way you leave these notes. We can also clear that note. So I want to remove it. And once those notes are cleared, it'll go back to being a little red zero because there's no notes there. The next icon over is our charge and credit icon where we can manually apply a charge to a person. So most of the charges on the website are automatically generated. If someone signs up for an event that has a fee, it will add that charge automatically. You don't need to do that manually. But if someone incurs some kind of charge, like they broke something or dented someone's car and you need to charge them, outside of the automatic ways to charge someone, you can manually apply a charge using this option. The same goes for a credit. If someone volunteers or donates a generous gift and you want to give them a credit towards their next purchase, you can manually assign a credit here as well and say, hey, I'm going to give you, a $25 credit that you can use towards the website, for an event or something. You can manually assign them a credit as well. Um, the next icon over is our renew icon. This is a really interesting icon. It changes color, or I guess it won't. It won't. Your members don't renew, so this shouldn't actually be necessary to click on. This would just go through the renewal process for your members. Because your members don't expire and won't need to renew, this icon can just be left alone. You shouldn't have to use it at all. But just for context, it is the button you would press to go in and manually renew a member. It would technically turn red if a member was ever about to expire, but your members don't expire, so it should never turn red. Um, the last kind of couple icons you'll see, there will be icons that may or may not appear depending on certain configurations. So you'll notice there's different numbers of icons for different members. This last kind of end of the row, you'll see this option that looks like two people with a chain link between them. Here, I can zoom in just a little bit to make it easier to see. Um, two people with a chain link. That is the icon that will show up if someone has secondary members. So we can see the last icon here is the reports icon. This is only really used for a couple things. You have the option to print out an invoice in the either double window or single window format, so you can physically mail that to them if you need to send them an invoice. It'll include any outstanding transaction. So again, if you see that dollar sign and you don't, have an email for them or something, and you need to send a paper mail to them, you can send it that way. There's also an option if you happen to have a Zebra label printer, you can print out their kind of mailing address information that you can just stick a sticker onto a mailing address instead of writing it out. But this is all just for invoicing purposes if you need to physically send someone an invoice. It is also sometimes useful to print these even if you're not physically mailing. This will still give you a PDF of their invoice, so you can email it to them if you like as well. So if they're just not responding to the automatic messages that they're going to get, then you can print it out and directly email it to them and say, hey, here's an invoice coming from my email to you, letting you know, hey, you've got an outstanding charge. So I promised at the beginning that we would circle back to the pencil. So let's do that now. The pencil is probably the place you'll go to the most. So between the pencil and clicking on their status, those are the two options you'll use the most. When we click on the pencil, it'll take us into their member profile. There's some slight differences between the member profile that you would get to and the member profile that you see in the people manager. You'll notice I have things like my member number. I cannot change that myself. It has to be changed by an administrator. You'll also notice that there's things like I can come in here and I can change my own username and password. So I can come here and I can update my username and password if I like. But again, these are all things that I'm getting to by clicking on my name in the top right and clicking on profile. It may look very similar, but when we go through the people manager and click on the pencil to get to someone's profile, there will be some slight differences. So if we come in here for Michael, you'll see basic member information. When I click here, Because I'm looking at this through the people manager as an administrator, I do actually have access to change their member number to something else. Keep in mind, it still needs to be a unique member number. You can't set it to match someone else's member number. We can also come in here and change their address information. We can change their email if we need to. There's a lot of different information that we can change. One other major difference that you'll see between your own member profile and looking at someone else's profile through the people manager, you'll notice the password reset button is missing. So it's not right there anymore. And instead, because we're looking at this as an administrator, we will see the reset password button under website functions. And when we click reset password here, instead of just typing in a new password for the person, because if we did that, we would know their password because we typed it in for them. Instead, as an administrator, we can hit reset password. It'll say, would you like to reset the password for Michael Club Express? And if I say okay, it's going to send Michael an email with a new automatically generated password. And the next time Michael logs in using that password, he will set his own password. So that is how we reset a password for a member who's having trouble getting logged in. Let's say on the outside chance this happens every once in a blue moon, someone loses access to their email or someone doesn't have an email address or something like that. How do we reset their password without sending them an email? If we have someone who doesn't have an email address here, and I'll take the email address out, and if we save, when we've got a member who has no email address, you'll see no email address linked to this account. If we reset this password now, we get this little pop-up that says password changed, new password is Michael, some random numbers. So that's the new password it's going to randomly generate for him. And then it'll also tell us the username. And then we can take this and hand it, we can write it down and tell them over the phone. We can text it to them. We can, manually email it to them if they have a different email or something like that. However you want to deliver this to them, this is how we would reset their password. And again, once Michael uses this password one time, it will ask Michael to reset his own password. I saw a message in the chat that says who assigns membership numbers. That's assigned automatically. Anytime someone is added to the system, they are assigned a new membership number, and it just ticks up by one. So if your current highest member number is 8,500, the next person that's added to the system is 8,501 and 8,502. If you try to assign a member number that's already been used, it'll give you an error, letting you know that someone's already using it. The last place that is admin only in the member profile, again, most of this is accessible by the member themselves, but one place that is admin only is the member type expiration join date. So over here under more member options, only administrators have access to this second option here that says member type expiration. We as administrators are able to come in here and manually change someone's membership type. So we could say, hey, someone was added as a member, but they're actually supposed to be set to staff or 35 and under or something like that. Because we have administrative control, we can actually just directly change that. We can also update their expiration date and their join date. So if we said, hey, Michael's about to expire in 2025, but he's not supposed to expire, we'll set it to 53 like everyone else. So we'll say Michael expires in 2053. Organization join date will say, hey, Michael actually joined way back in 2015. And we can come in here and we can manually change that. The member themselves does not have access to change any of these functions. So these are all functions that are only accessible by administrators. So that's another useful tool that's good for administrators to know about. Lastly, on this profile page, we have our transaction history and payment history. I like to show this off because this is a really important place if you're ever curious if someone has incurred a transaction or paid for a transaction. You can come in here and we can say, show me my transaction history. And we can say, look, there's that $10 charge that I just assigned. It's currently paid in full. I can also delete that charge and say, hey, I want to remove this entirely. And if we go and look at payment history, we keep these two things separate because payments can actually be applied to multiple transactions. So someone might incur two transactions that they pay for with one check or something like that. So we can come in here and we can see check payment. If that check were to bounce or something like that, we can actually come in here and we can remove. Oh no, that's sorry. Subgroup admins can't remove check. So if you needed to have a check removed, you need to reach out to a top level administrator to have them come into this profile and remove that check payment. If a payment that was already applied to a transaction is removed, that transaction would just go back into the unpaid status, and then you could let them know, hey, you can try, sending another check or pay by credit card online, however they want to submit that. This is also where you would come and look at see any open credits that someone might have. So if someone was refunded, that refund would go here into the credits section. All right. So that's those are kind of the important places for admins to go. One last thing I'll point out for our subgroup admins, there is an option over here in the more member options where we can see clubs and additional members. And this is where we can come and you'll see that this person is a member of the Chicago Club, but I, as a Chicago admin, am not able to change that. So you're not able to go in and assign someone to your club or assign someone to another club. If someone is, leaving your club or joining your club, coming or going, and you need that to change, you would need to reach out to a top level administrator to have that change. So you cannot change that. You are able to add secondary members from this screen though. So if someone says, "Hey, my spouse is joining," and we need to add, Michael's wife, we can come in here and we can add a secondary member. We can enter the membership information for Michael's wife, fill that in and save it, and that would connect a new membership to Michael straight from this screen. All right, so that's most of what I wanted to show off for the people management. Let's head over to the committee management really quickly. When we leave this screen and we go back to our control panel, we've just been talking about the people manager. Um, Incredibly quickly, I'll show you the people lookup. It is almost exactly the same. We get the same search box. The only difference is we just see the information. There's no icons over here to make changes. This is just where we can go in and take a look at someone. So there's Michael. And I can say, show me Michael's information. If he had an address here or something, we could come in and see that. I took his email away, so his email is currently missing. Oh, I saw someone just posted in the chat. Subgroup administrators, club administrators are able to add members. They just cannot be added to other clubs. So if you can add a member to the Chicago club, you can add a brand new member or add a secondary member to Chicago, but you cannot add someone to a different club. So if you have a member that's in Chicago and they're moving to New York, you can't take a member and assign them to New York. But if they want to keep their profile and just move it to New York, a top level Serra International admin can do that. So it's not something that it's only in the case of someone is moving from one club to another that has to be taken care of by a Serra International top level admin. All right, so let's talk about committees now. So if we head over to our committees and boards function, right now, because I am a subgroup administrator for Chicago, I only see the Chicago board as my option. If I have extra committees that I need to add, I do have the option to create a new committee. So I can come in here and I can say test committee. You'll notice that you'll only have the ability to add it at the Chicago level. You will not have access to add it at say the top level or for other chapters. You can optionally fill in a purpose. If you have created a custom page, you can link a custom page that you've created to your subgroup and it'll show up, or to your committee, and it'll show up as a part of that committee. So when someone's looking at your listed committee, they can see a certain page with information about it. You can also make it a subcommittee. So we can come in here and we can say, I want this to be a subcommittee. The Chicago board would be a valid option. Unfortunately, the Chicago board is already a subcommittee of a different committee. So when you're creating a committee, it can only be a subcommittee of one level. So you cannot have a subcommittee be a subcommittee of another subcommittee. Sorry, I know that's a confusing kind of tier list, but you can only have either top level or subcommittee. You cannot have like a subcommittee within a subcommittee. So if there's no other top level committees, I cannot select it because the Chicago board is already a subcommittee. But if I were to create this with no parent committee, I could then make another committee inside of the test committee. Ooh, never said the word committee so many times in a row. Um, you have the option to show who is available to who you can see the members. You have the option to set it to admins only, meaning this is a hidden committee. You can also show it to your members. So this will be available only to members, Or you can say, hey, this is a completely public committee. If you set it to members and non-members, everyone is able to see who is on this committee. You have the option to show members' profile photos. So if a member has updated their profile, so their little directory profile to include a photo, you can say whether or not you want their picture shown. So you can say no, members, or members and everyone, just like above. And then you can also show and send email buttons. So this will let people send an email to the committee. You can say, no, there is no way to email the committee. You can say, yes, members of the committee can email all the other committee members. Or you can say, yes, everyone in Sarah International is able to email the members of this committee. It would just give them a button they can click on to type a plain text email to that committee. You can also set up a committee email. I'll talk about share image that'll show up all over Club Express. I'll talk about that probably in a later training because there's a lot to it. But for the most part, you don't need a share image for anything. Um, for committee email, you can also set up an email address. So you could say, this is, you know, we could say committee@gmail.com or something like that. And when someone clicks the send email button, that is the email address it would go to. If you do not fill in a committee address, then it would just go to their private email addresses. Then you have options like, do I want to show this on the website? If we uncheck this, then again, similar to the admin only option, it would be a hidden committee that would not show up. We have the option to limit memberships. We can say, hey, this is a committee that can only fit 5 people. So we can limit it that way. And then there's also a track dates option where we can track the terms. So especially if this is one of our board committees, we can track the terms of office that way. And there's actually an important note. So I talked with some of your admins. If we head over to our new committee that we've got here, I'm actually going to jump back to our Chicago board committee and show an example. If we click on the members icon over here, this is where we can go and see who is on the committee. And we can see right now we've got Jim and Joe on our committee. You'll notice they have start dates and no end date. When you are adding people to your board for your club, you want to make sure to leave the end date open. If you set an end date and it comes and goes without you selecting a new member, then that role will not get emails and that person will stop getting emails. So in this case, if we set this end date as tomorrow, once tomorrow comes and goes, we will no longer get any emails to the club treasurer. Jim would stop getting those treasurer emails. We want to keep that term date empty. We want to leave it empty. It's not a required field, so there's no problem just leaving it blank. So let's say I want to add, we'll use Michael as an example again. I'll search for Michael by last name, Club Express Michael. There he is. I will say this is our club chaplain. I will set a start date of, okay, Michael is the chaplain as of today. I can leave the end date blank. And then I can choose what contact information I want to share about Michael. I'll just leave everything set to no here. We'll set save. So now we've added Michael as the club chaplain. We can see there's that start date. The end date is empty. When it comes time for a new club chaplain to be assigned, what we can do is we can come in here and we can say starting tomorrow, or, we'll come in here and we'll say, I want to edit this. All I do is click this little edit pencil over here with the little person with an edit, and I just change who's holding the row. So I can come over here to Michael. I can say now it is, pick on someone else. Well, we'll pick myself. There we go. Member. Test member. I'll assign myself to that role. And now the club chaplain is test member. Someone's asked, can they add more members to the board? Yes, you can always just click any of the vacant slots. You can always add a member, or you can just hit the add member button to add a member to it. You'll notice if you get full, so if you filled all of your slots and you need your board to be slightly bigger, what you would do is you would come back to this screen and you can click on the pencil icon. So right now for our test committee, we've got a limit of 5. We can come in here and we can say, I want to change that limit to, 8. And now we can fit 8 people in our committee. If you don't have a limit, you can also come in here and you can say, it's not limited membership. We'll save. And now, there's no maximum limit if we look at our page, there's no committee members found. There's no limit. We can just add people willy-nilly to make the committee as big as it needs to be. I'm going over time a little bit, but it looks like I've still got a lot of you here. We have a recording of this, so if you need to drop off, we'll have the recording available later. I'm gonna go over time just a little bit and go talk about emails for just a little bit, because we want to make sure we cover that. And if you have to drop off, then just make sure to check that recording. Uh, Sorry, I can be a little long-winded from time to time. If we head over to the communications section of the control panel, I want to take a minute to talk about emailing. It's something that's really important for our subgroup administrators. When we go into emailing, this is what the emailing admin page looks like. And this is the tool you can use to manually craft emails to all of your members. Again, I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. When you're sending an email, the only people that are going to get your emails are going to be members of your club. Even if there is a mailing list that looks like it would go to everyone in Serra International, or if it's manually including certain people, if they're not members of your club, they are not going to get that email. So now let's talk about why it might look that way and how to create an email. So just to start from scratch, when we click this add emailing button, we land on this page where we can come in and craft our email. And there's kind of three things we have to do to craft an email. We have to set our basic information. So you'll see there's this red exclamation point letting us know that we haven't done that yet. When we come in here and click edit basics, we can see the category is going to automatically be selected to our Chicago board because that is our Chicago email category. You'll see this allowed on view email page. You can pretty much ignore this checkbox because I don't think the view email page is going to be used. So, whether you check this or not, it shouldn't really make any changes. You'll see a from email address and a from name. It should automatically load in the email in your profile and your name. You can change that if you need to. So if you need this to come from, Chicago Club or something like that, you can change what email address it looks like your email is coming from. So you can make it look like it's coming from, chicagoclub@gmail.com, even though it's being sent from Club Express. Do keep in mind that it doesn't actually work to, I always, don't think you can come in here and make it look like it's coming from someone else, because when you send the email, it will say in the from address, it says like from Club Express email server, and your name is attached to the email because you're logged in as your profile. So it is pretty easy to figure out who actually was behind the email. I just like to point that out just in case someone gets any funny ideas. um, You've also got a send time. So this is either going to send now. So when we say this email is ready, it'll go out immediately, or we can schedule an email and say, hey, I want this to go out, let's say tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. If you want it to go out at a weirdly specific time, you can also just type here and you can say, I want it to go out 9:37 a.m. and it will schedule the email to go out at that time. We need to set a subject. We can just say subject here. We can manually CC or BCC people. This will be able to send to people who are not members of your club. So if you have a manual email address that you want to include, you can put it in the CC or BCC field and it will copy or blind copy someone. If you copy them, then they would be included on reply alls. If you blind copy someone, then they would not be listed on the email. When it comes to content, I highly recommend that you always leave it as HTML. If you set it to plain text, then that's going to only send a plain text email. No fonts, no colors, no links, no images, just plain text. You're way better off setting it to HTML. You don't need to know HTML to send an HTML email. For our options for what we check here, there's a very specific reason that I always recommend that you leave urgent unchecked. If it is a truly, truly urgent email that people have to see, then you can check it. But if your organization sends, dozens of urgent emails in a month, you will quickly get picked up by spam filters because spam filters do not like it when they see a lot of urgent emails coming in. So I always say be very sparing with that urgent email. If it's really urgent, but it's not so urgent that it's like life threatening, just leave that unchecked. You can use something in our track opens option to make it more deliverable, and I'll show you how to do that. So if you the opposite of set urgent, I do recommend you check the track opens box. So if you're using the HTML option, You have the option to include some code in the email that will keep track of who has and has not opened the email. So if you check this track opens box, it'll keep track of who's opened it. And you can actually get reports after the email is sent to see who has and has not opened it. Keep in mind that there are a small subset of email users who have privacy settings set in a certain way that it will not report that it is opened, even if it has been. So if someone is using specifically Apple users who use iPhones to check their mail, the Mail app has a setting where you can say, do not let anyone track me. And then even if they do open the email, it'll show up in our system that they have not opened it. So I always just tell people, don't go pointing fingers saying you didn't open the email, because there's a chance that they did and it just didn't report it. It is useful though. It is, I would say, in the ballpark of like 95 to 99% accurate, depending on your demographic. So it's a good way to see, hey, I got, you know, 80% of my people open the email. That's great. If you see that no one opened your email, you might say, well, I need to, think about how I'm wording my emails subject to make sure that people open it. If you do choose to track opens, there's an option to resend an email if it doesn't get opened. If you leave it to 0, then it will not get sent. So this would just send the email one time and it will not resend if you leave this as 0. If you set it to anything other than 0, then a number of days, whatever you select after you send the email, anyone that has yet to open it, based on our tracked open information, will get the email again. So you can double send your email. I recommend doing that instead of setting an urgent flag for your urgent email. So if you have, an update about some sort of change to an event or something, and it's really important that people see it, you can send it. And then if someone hasn't opened it, you can send it again to try to get them to see it a second time. A really useful tool that. And then another option that I also like to turn on is the personalization option. Setting this right now doesn't change anything, but we'll see later on, because we've turned this personalization option. This will let us do things like, instead of saying hello members, we can say, hello your name. We can say hello John, hello Tim, hello, Stephen. We can make it so that when the email goes out, whoever is getting it, their name is inserted into the email. And I'll show you how to manage that in just a second. That is our basic info. And once we've saved it, you'll see that this turns into a little green check mark, letting us know that we've done it. We also need to set our distribution list. And this is where things get occasionally complicated, but the more you do it, the easier and faster it'll get. When we click edit distribution list, we will see two options show up. We will see an option to use a saved distribution list, and we'll see a lot of different saved distribution lists here. And we'll also see the option to create a new list. When it is your first time sending emails, I recommend you go to the create new list option. This will help you understand how it works. And once you've got lists that you like, you can save those. I have talked to some of the leadership at Serra International, and they have a very specific way they would like you to save your distribution lists if you need to. But before we get to that, let's talk about how the distribution list is actually created. So when you're creating a distribution list, you'll see a lot of options here. You'll see active solo members. You'll see this little drop down. And it doesn't give you just like a list of people to send it to. It actually gives you a list of criteria. So you can say, hey, I want to send it to all of my recent members. So we can set a criteria of members that joined in the last 10, 30, or 60, 90 days. And when this email goes out, it will check the system and say, I want to send this email to recent membership. So we could save this option. Let's hit add. And now we've added the criteria of I'm sending this to new members within the last 10 days. I can actually continue to make this distribution list even more complex. I can choose to come in here and say, I also want to send it to all of my members of a selected type. So I'm also going to send it to my staff. So I'm going to send this to all of my new members and my staff so that they know that I sent it to them as well. And I can hit add again. And so now you'll see two kind of criteria listed: new members within the last 10 days and all of my member type staff. I can then come in here and say, I will reuse this list. I don't want to have to create this every time. I want to just save this for use in the future. And I can come in here and I can save this as Devin's example. And once I save this, it will save the name devix example as a saved distribution list type, and it will just automatically refill this with the new membership with the last 10 days and the membership type staff. It'll remember that for me. When you are a subgroup admin or a club admin, when you are saving a distribution list, the Sarah International top level admins would like you to put in before your name your club name. So, if, for example, I would say Chicago, Devin's example, or I would say, New York, Devin's example, whatever chapter you are an administrator of, you'd want to put in your club name and then your example. So that's how you would save your list, and then it would show up there in the future. I'm not going to add to the list because you can already see that there's quite a few. If it's an easy option, so let's say all active members. So if we choose this option right here, all active members, this is going to be in reference to all of your active members. So I save that option. Now that I've selected all active members, you'll see that this turns green. Again, all I'm doing is I'm coming up here and I'm saying I want to select, this specific pre-used distribution list, and it will give me that little green check mark letting me know that that's who it's saved as. One thing that a lot of people don't always grasp is once we save a distribution list, it's not saving a list of names. It's saving a list of criteria. So when I save a distribution list, it's saying all of my recent members in the past 10 days. So that option that I had as an example before. So if I change that to recent again, I can actually just type in here to search for different options. So we'll add that option. So let's save this. We'll say I'm going to save this as recent members. I promise, John and Don, I will come back and remove this. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and save this as an example. Wait, I'm going to do this correctly, and I'll say Chicago. Chicago recent members 10 days. Now that I've saved that, I can come back here and I can reuse it, and I should see Chicago recent members 10 days on the list of saved options that I can use. If I use that today, it's going to look at the past 10 days and send it to all of the members that have joined my organization last 10 days. 6 months from now, when I come back to send an email and I want to send to all of the 10 days, I can just use that again, and it'll look at the last 10 days as of the email going out. So you don't need to consider this a saved list of names. It is a saved list of criteria as of the time the email is being sent out. So that's an important thing to remember, is that when you save a distribution list, it's not saving the names, it's saving the criteria. Once we've got who we want that email to go to, we now just need to create our body. I'm already well over time, so I'm not going to go into the complex side of this, but I'm going to go into the fairly high level focus part. So the most basic email we would want to send out would just be some text. So you'll see over on the right hand side, we've got all these elements. There's some fancy options you can play around with, and I would highly recommend you just come to the screen and make some mock emails and send them to yourself. But we can come over here and we can say, I want to create a text email. I drag that option over to my blank canvas here. And then in order to edit the text of my email, I can hit this pencil and I'll get this little text editor that I can pop up and type in, and I can say, hello, my members. This is an email. Thanks. Um, so I can just, write out whatever email I would like to send, and I can save that. And now I'm technically done. I've got the text of my email. I've got who it's going to. I've got the basic information. And down here at the bottom, I've got my options to save and continue. That would be like hitting the floppy drive icon in Word. Those of you, save and keep working on it. There's also save and close. So if I wanted to come back to this later, I could save and close. And then if I search here, I'll see there's that draft I just created, and I can come back to it at another time, so I can get the pencil to get back into this email that I was working on. I've got save as a template. I would recommend against saving as template because, again, the list of templates is shared among all clubs. So if you've got a template you like, I would talk to the top level admins about having a template saved. If you're a club or subgroup administrator, try not to save too many templates because it'll make that list really, really long and really confusing. So leave the templating to your top level admins. One thing I do recommend doing every time you're sending an email is send a test. This will let you send a test email. It'll preload your email address and you can just hit send test to see what it looks like in your inbox. Because obviously the email isn't going to look like this. It'll look like just this inside inner portion. So if you want to see what it looks like in an inbox before you send it out to all your members, you can use this send test option to send a test email to yourself. If you need to, you can also include other people in there. So if you want to send it to your board for your club, you can send a test to other people as well, to have them kind of proofread it before you send it out to everyone. And once you're ready for it to go to everyone, you can hit ready for delivery and it will either get sent out immediately if you chose the now option in your basic info, or if you scheduled it for the future and you hit ready for delivery. So let's say ready for delivery, scheduled for this time. So it's going to go out tomorrow morning at 9:37 to all of my new memberships within the last 10 days. Um, Once you've scheduled it, you can go back and change it. So let's say, oh man, I forgot to show you guys how to insert people's names. I can come in here and I can click on this pencil. I can come in here and make changes and say, instead of saying hello members, I want it to say hello your first name. So this is that section I was talking about back in that personalization allowed. I can come in here and say, I don't want to say hello members. I want to say hello. And you'll see this tag option at the top. This tag will let us select a number of criteria. Most common by a country mile is hello first name. So we want to say hello. I'll choose first name and I can put my cursor where I want it to go and I'll hit insert tag. So now it says hello, squiggle, squiggle, first name, squiggle, squiggle. Anytime I send this email out, I can save this now. Let's change that to thanks correctly. There we go. When I send this out, that squiggle section is going to get automatically replaced by the recipient's name. So if I got that in my inbox, it would say hello, Devin. When John gets it in his inbox, it's going to say hello, John. When Tim gets it in his inbox, it's going to say hello, Tim, so on and so forth. So it'll have your name, the recipient's name right there. It'll say hello, first name. As a note, when you send tests, it does not know who you are when it's sending a test email. So when you send a test, it will say hello, squiggle, squiggle, first name in the test email. So don't get scared by that. It will send it out correctly when you send it out to everyone. Um, there are other things you can get fancier with the tags. There's things like your membership number, if you need to include that, membership type, expiration date. There's a lot of different fields you can include from the member's information. So I could fill in information like, city. Hey, I noticed that you're in city, and it'll fill in the city from their address field. Keep in mind, if you include information here that they have not filled in, so for example, Michael didn't fill in what city he lives in, this would just be blank. So if you say something like, I noticed that you live in, and they haven't filled in their own city, it's going to show up as blank. So keep that in mind. There's only a few fields that are absolutely required. First name is one of them, so that will never be blank. So again, it's one of the reasons that the most common one we use and the one we use that we recommend the most is just first name. That's the easiest one to use right there. Last thing, when it comes to scheduled emails. So I had this email scheduled. I have made a change. If I were to come in here and say save and close, I already scheduled it once, but once I start making changes, it goes back to draft. So you can see the status of this email now says draft. The scheduled time tomorrow morning will now come and go, and this email will not go out because it is in draft. Once I have made edits to a scheduled email, you need to make sure to come in here and say ready for delivery. The save and close will not send it. You say ready for delivery. And now you'll see it no longer says draft over here. Now this will successfully go out tomorrow morning. Once it does go out, there's some interesting things that'll show up over here. This little bar graph will give you some results about who actually received the email. If you're tracking opens, it'll also show you the track opens. Because this email hasn't been sent, there's no information yet. But once it goes out, this little bar graph will give you the information about who received and who opened your email. And then there will also be a report icon that will show up. It'll be that same blue report icon that we saw way back in the People Manager. And you can click on that to get information about if you're tracking those opens, like I recommend, then it'll actually show you who has and has not opened your emails. All right, so that's the emailing module. There's a lot more complexity. Again, I recommend that you come in here and play with the other element types. You can do things like adding images, and you can add, change things like background colors and stuff. You can come in here and you can make the background of this red if we wanted to. That is a section that I would just recommend you get in here and kind of play around with to get a better grip of. To answer a couple questions really quickly before we wrap up, because I know we're well over time for today. Um, Someone asked to jump back to committees really quickly. Is there a way to track who held a position for an amount of time? You can. So if you wanted to, instead of changing who holds a role, if we go back to our people tab, go to our committees. Once we've added a new member, so let's say right now I'm holding the club chaplain role, and let's say I actually started a year ago. Change my start date. If I want to add a new member, I can come in here and I can say my term end date. So once this person leaves, I can actually come in here and I can say, I'm going to end this role today, or I'll say ended yesterday and save. Once someone has a term end date, it'll now record them as a past member. You'll see it is now in red. So now that is an old term end date, they will get tracked as red. And then we can come in here and we can add a new member as club chaplain. So we can come in here and I'll add Michael again. And I'll say he is club chaplain. There it is. And he starts as of today. And we can save that. And so now we've got club chaplain Michael Club Express started today. And then we can see we're still recording the information, Club Chaplain, me, the test member, from 2023 to 2024. It will not overfill your board. So this person, test person, as long as they are expired, as long as their term date is in the past, they will not count against the number you can have. So you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This adds up to 12 right here. This test person, because am expired, because I'm no longer a current member, I'm not counting against the maximum number of people in this committee. So if we go back to our previous page now, you'll see the Chicago board can only have 12 members. It's been set to be a maximum of 12, but past board members do not count against that maximum. So you can always, as long as you make sure to come in here. And so let's say, Michael now expires. We come in here and say Michael was club trustee from 2023 to yesterday as well. I can come in here and I can modify that information to keep track of that. Keep in mind, if you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're being diligent with it, because if you accidentally set the wrong dates or the wrong club, you are actually able to come back in here and change old members. So these aren't permanently recorded. There's not a way to set these in stone. So if you're not careful, you could potentially accidentally come in here and say, I'm going to change my start date to 2021 or something like that, or change my end date to 2026. If you accidentally misenter that information, you could accidentally set me back to being an active person because my end date is in the future. So you don't ever want someone to have an end date in the future. The only reason you would want someone to have an end date is if they are no longer holding that role. And you can come in here and set that to a past date. And now they are recorded as a past person. If you wanted to manually add, so let's say, before you guys moved to Club Express, if you wanted to manually add a board member that was in the past just for records keeping, you can actually also just add a board member. We can come in here and say, Jim. Oh, he's already on the board. Actually, we don't want to use him. Let's say Beth was on the board way back in 2017 from 2016. Save. So we can come back here. We can add past board members if we want to. And again, that's still not counting against our 12 maximum. And then if we're done with them, you also want to make sure that you remove. So all of these are inaccurate. I'm going to go ahead and clean up my mess and delete those errant entries. Someone asked, what's the disaster recovery backup frequency? So Club Express does backups. And so if there is some sort of disaster, we can roll back. We back up regularly. I can't remember the time frame on it off the top of my head. We're very careful about rollbacks. If it's admin error, so if an admin comes in and deletes a bunch of members, we're not going to roll back for that, just so you know. You want to be very careful with your manual data entry. If there's some sort of catastrophe where there's some sort of data corruption or something like that, we do maintain backups in that case, and we can roll back in that case. But again, you just want to be careful because we can't roll back just because of user error. But it's something like weekly or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But we do maintain a log of backups. All right. I think that's most of what I needed to cover for today. And I know there's a handful of questions, but we're about 50% over time. But thank you all for sitting and listening to me today. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to your admin team or reach out to Club Express support. That's support@clubexpress.com. And also, we have several more trainings to come, so I'm sure I'll be seeing and hearing from you again. So questions that you have can also be brought up then as well. But I'll go ahead and wrap up for the day. Thank you guys so much for kind of hanging out with me for a little bit, and I'll see you guys next time.